In 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by the military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from a maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team. Right? If you grew up watching 80s television, then you know exactly what that show was. And you probably love the A-Team because, let's face it, for 80s television, the A-Team was one of the best shows on television. I loved watching it with my dad. And now, years later, my children like watching the 2010 movie with Liam Neeson with me. I don't think it's as good as the original TV series, but, I'm partial. All that history with my dad, and my kids are going to have that same history with me of watching the show and loving it. But why do we love the A-Team? Well, it made for a compelling story. They're abandoned and betrayed by the military they love after serving their country. They're set up for a crime they didn't commit, and they go to jail. But we never dwell on the part of them going to prison as innocent men because that part's uncomfortable. In fact, the television show didn't cover it much at all. The 2010 movie kind of blew it out of proportion because prison isn't that nice. But they don't spend time on it because the idea of innocent men sitting in a living hell while no one listens to their pleas, that's not just uncomfortable. That's a horrible, horrible concept that makes most of our skin crawl. Well, what if it wasn't just a story? I'm not saying the A-Team. I'm talking about the idea of innocent men going to prison for crimes they didn't commit. My guest today and 3 other men were arrested for a double homicide in 1992 that they were not involved with. They weren't set up by a rival gang, or there was no evil mastermind like some bad movie setting up the innocents to take the fall. No, instead, they were coerced and tortured by police detectives without legal representation or an advocate for at least one of them, maybe 2 of them, who were actually legally minors at the time. They were tortured. Let me be clear about that. Tortured and coerced into confessing to crimes they didn't commit so the police could close a case. Even worse, later they found out the police withheld exculpatory evidence from their lawyers from day one that proved they were innocent. They knew they were innocent from the get-go. Life sentences without parole were handed down for 2 of the men, and 30 years apiece were handed down for the other 2. What resilience do you possess to withstand 21 years in a maximum security prison? Trying to prove your innocence, knowing the people who were supposed to champion justice set you up, all while trying to just survive day-to-day life in what can only be described as a living nightmare at times. Frequently, even. Maximum security prisons are not a nice place. They're not. We've talked to a former inmate before. Bad things happen all the time. And reading their story in the book they wrote, bad things happen a lot. And for 21 years, this man rode the roller coaster of hope and despair, trying to survive while trying to convince people that they didn't belong there. Not only did Deon not lose himself and become a horrible man, because let me be honest, I think that would crush me, and I think it would crush most people. It happens to a lot of prisoners who have been convicted wrongfully, where they just kind of collapse and become the men that they're framed for being. Not only did he not lose himself and crumble, now he's got a really clear purpose, and he's trying to free innocent men, because there are a lot of them still in the Illinois prison system and other places too, but we'll get into more of that later. Gentlemen, it is my privilege today to introduce you to Deon Patrick and welcome Deon to the Driven to Thrive broadcast. Let's get right into this. Deon, after an extraordinary education in the School of Hard Knocks, you now coach and consult and help other men on their journey through life. What is the single most important piece of advice or knowledge that you share with men these days?
I think the main thing is to never give up, especially when it's something that you truly aspire to achieve and it's something that you know you should have in life. Like you just always have to be steadfast in what your beliefs are and continue to thrive to accomplish those goals.
All right. Now, gentlemen, sit with that for about 90 seconds while we check in with our sponsors. Then we're going to go deep into resilience and purpose with Deon Patrick today on the Driven to Thrive broadcast.
I hear every day about the products you all wish MyPillow carried. Well, guess what? We probably do. Slippers, bathrobes, pet beds, blankets, mattresses, sleepwear, loungewear, duvets, comforters, pot holders, aprons, oven mitts, and so much more. And they're all on sale. For example, get our best-selling standard MyPillows for only $14.98. Body pillows, $29.98. 6-piece bath towels or kitchen towel sets, just $29.98. Multi-use MyPillow 2.0s with pillowcase, $9.98. Save $40 on our Spring Percale and Giza Dream bedsheet sets. Any size, any color, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save up to 80% on all MyPillow products. And I've never done this before. When you spend $100 or more, you're going to get 2 standard MyPillows absolutely free.
We're at MyPillow House. I have dozens of MyPillow products I use every single day. We're proud to have Mike Lindell at MyPillow as sponsor of the show. You can go to MyPillow.com and use the code THRIVE for up to 80% off your order and free shipping over $75 for our listeners. Now, back to our show. Welcome to the Driven to Thrive broadcast, purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. I'm your host, Brent Dallin, and we help men go from living to thriving, purpose-filled, intentional lives. My guest today is author and coach Deon Patrick. Deon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Deon, we're gonna ease into this. I want to get to know who you are. So, in your own words today, in this moment, who is Deon Patrick in your own words?
Deon Patrick is a father. I'm a grandfather. I'm a brother. I'm a cousin. Love a family man. I love my family to death. Learned a lot more about myself in life because in my earlier years, I wasn't that attached to my family. I was kind of detached and I was hanging more with my friends. But now I've gravitated back to my family where I should have been all the time. I think I'm just a person that just wants to see more out of life for everybody. I want to see everybody do well in life. I want to see everybody succeed in life and just go on and do great things.
Now, Deon, you co-authored an extraordinary story, your story, in the book The Hazel Boys: The Trials of Four Innocent Men. Tell us a little bit about the book itself.
Well, the book touches on me and 3 of my co-authors, which were also co-defendants in a case that totally changed our lives. One of us was 15 at the time it started. Out of the 4 authors, I was the oldest at 20. And it's just a very impactful book that talks about the trials that we went through to get our lives back and to get our freedom back as well. And to just start moving our lives in the right direction.
Now, at the end of the book, and no spoilers here, guys, you're going to have to read it, but at the end of the book, you were coming out of 21 years of being in prison. And what really tugged at my heartstrings was this moment you were entering into where you were having to build a new relationship with your kids after not being able to be a part of their lives. How's that going for you? You said you had...
I had 2 kids. I have a son and a daughter. They're both 30 plus, 32 and 33. And it's 11 years in and I'm still rebuilding that relationship. Like we still have our struggles where we like bump heads on idealism and how things should really go. And but I still feel like at the end of the day, like I'm never going to tell my kids anything wrong. So I always feel like they should listen to me because I'm not going to guide them in the wrong direction at all. So, but it's great. Like we love each other. I just think we tend to not agree on the direction that people's lives should be going in right now.
Okay. I think that's just the plight of any good father is like, I have a different opinion of what you should be doing and trying to find that line. I know my dad had to hold back several times with me. Is like, I don't agree with, but you know what? I'm going to let you go. You find that a little bit, and I'm right here when you need me. And I think that's the best a father can hope for, right?
Yeah,
A kid's going to know you love them and come back when they are ready to talk on it.
exactly. And I think we do that. And it's like, I always know they'll be back though. So I just be waiting for them to come back. So I'm here when they need me. It's like, I don't know, like I know like my route to where I'm at today, I didn't have that. Like a lot of things I had to figure out. And I don't think they have to figure out as much if they just take the advice that's given to them. Because I also realize now as an adult that if I would have followed my mother's blueprint to a T, I wouldn't have went through any of the things that I went through in life.
Now, guys, you're gonna have to actually read the book. Okay. I finished the book and I'm not gonna lie. It was, man. There were parts where I was angry. There were parts where I was emotional. Um, y'all's story is, you want to believe that happens in other countries, like communist countries. You don't want to believe that happens here in the U.S.,
Yes.
which makes it so much harder. But you guys, I will have a complete book review over on the purposedrivenmen.com later this week as well, so you guys can dig farther into that book, and we're going to talk about it a little more today. Deon, when people find out who you are and your backstory, right, this side of this, what do people misunderstand the most about you?
Oh, that's a good question. Because I think a lot of times I do my best to not allow people to know my backstory until they get to know me as a person and understand who I am, right? Because think some people will pass judgment on you. I know when I first came home in 2014, it was hard for me to even rent an apartment because they were doing background checks and that stuff was popping up. And so I think for me, when people do learn my backstory, I think there's a lot of questions because we live in a society where a lot of people believe in the system. And I live in a world where I understand that the system is broken and it's a flawed system. Like it doesn't actually work all the time. It works sometimes, but it doesn't work all the time, right? And I think like for me, like just getting to know people and them getting to know me, it gives them a better understanding and then puts them at ease to ask some of the questions they may want to know. And I'm fine with answering those questions.
What is one thing everybody should understand about you before we jump into the meat of today? We're going to get a little more serious here, guys, because Deon has so much valuable to pass on knowledge wise for you guys. But what is something that everybody should understand about you as a person before we jump into that?
I think the one thing about me, I'm an open book. I'm constantly learning. I think I've learned stuff from babies since I've been home, right? So I don't feel like at the age of 53 that I know everything. I'm okay with learning new things. And I think I also have this thing where I truly believe like it's not always the message, it's the messenger. And it's the way that some things are delivered. And that's just how I accept things now in life. Because if the messenger is off, we're not really going to receive a message. So I'm open to any type of conversation. Uh, I'm diligent in the things that I want to do, like I'm going to see them through. And that's just who I am as a person.
Okay. Now, guys, we've been getting to know Dion just a little bit. to let you know who he is today and where he's coming from right now in his life. And we are just barely scratching the surface of a very deep man. In this portion of the show, we're going to start diving into Deon's story, and we're going to talk about resilience in hard times and perseverance, because I believe that Deon has a lot to teach us all and share with us on this subject. Now, Deon, I'm going to step out of the way and just ask you to share your story to set the stage for the rest of this.
Well, I was a young man that was born in the city of Chicago I was born to a union. Like, my mother and father was married when I was born, but they may have gotten divorced when I was like 2 or 3 years old. So I was really raised by a single mother. Me and my brother as well. We were raised in the same household. My mother instilled a lot of different things in me and my brother. Like, she wanted to show us something different because we grew up on the west side of Chicago, which is a predominantly African-American community. And in like the 6th grade, she moved us to the north side of Chicago, like right down the street from Wrigley Field, where there was a melting pot of cultures and people. And she took us I learned how to play the piano at a very early age, like 5. Me and my brother learned how to play all brass instruments. She actually passed away, though, when I was 16. My brother was 18. When she passed, my brother was away at college already. So, which reverted me back to moving back to the west side with family members, because we had no family on the north side. But I stayed in school on the north side around the friends that I had formed and the relationships that I had formed already. When she passed, it kind of spiraled my life out of control a lot, because like, she was the only person that ever really, disciplined me or told me what to do. So I found myself like rebelling against a lot of guidance that people was trying to give me or instill in me, because I had never had to receive that type of correction other than from her. And started hanging in the streets a lot more, joined a street organization, which is considered a street gang. Ended up, I want to say, ended up going to the penitentiary in 91. I ended up going to boot camp. And I came home in 14 months to a totally different neighborhood. Like, I had 7 co-defendants on this case. I only knew one of them before I left for those 14 months. Everybody else was new to the neighborhood within that 14 months. And this case happened like 3 months and 3 or 4 weeks after that. We all ended up in a police interrogation room trying to tell our side of the story, which they had already concocted a story as to what had happened. The youngest of us, as I said earlier, was 15 years old, and he was the first one that they really put in the room and got him to say things to try to get himself out of the room, which bled off to everybody else. So we ended up in the county. I have a co-defendant named Daniel Taylor, who is also a co-author. His story is, the story is what it is, but his story is like just unbelievable, because he was actually in police custody the day the murder happened for misdemeanor, like city disorderly or something. And they took him in a room and physically abused him and made him say he was there holding someone while they was killed when he was in their custody at the time. And so we ended up in this fight for our life. We was facing the death penalty. The lowest we could have got was natural life, which is what me and Daniel received. So we get convicted. We go off to the penitentiary, which was a terrible place at that time. And I think what you did in that place was adapted to your environment, or you got devoured or eaten up, right? And so I don't think I saw the law library for the first 3 years or 4 years that I was in the penitentiary, because I was more focused on staying alive than going to the law library and figuring out how to get out of this place, right? And so fortunately, some things changed within that place, and we got to start focusing on our case more. We got a little bit of help from media outlets, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times. Most of the Chicago news channels came to our aid, which was in 1998, 99. We first started interacting with them. And it still took us like 14, 15 years to come home because we were filing things in that time and we were getting denied. No one was really giving us opportunity or even listening to our story. Uh, and then finally, we got a break in our case where Daniel had filed something in the Illinois Supreme Court, which was an Illinois writ of habeas corpus. And the Attorney General's office, who had to respond to that, asked for every piece of paper that had something to do with our case. In that, those papers they got, there were some papers that we never seen before that they actually proved that Daniel was incarcerated at the time, which they knew from day one because he proved it to them. But now we had actual papers that they did more homework and figured out even more through their means, like other Chicago police officers, civilians that worked in the lockup. And that was our one biggest break in the case, because I believe if we never were given those papers, because we couldn't have ever found them because they never gave them to us. But they were given to us by the Attorney General's office. And that's the one thing that broke this case and allowed us to get our freedom back.
Oh, there's so much to unpack with your story. So guys, if you haven't caught on at this point, Deon was falsely, erroneously convicted in a double homicide that he had no part in. They have been exonerated, they have been proven innocent, and they have been proven that they were railroaded into false confessions, that they had evidence withheld in their case by the prosecution that would have exonerated them. And Deon spent 21 years in prison. Not nice prison. 21 years in hardcore prison, fighting for his life, fighting for his freedom, fighting for his innocence. I like I said, I have had so many emotional ups and downs reading your story, man. And I'm going to encourage people. Like I said, we'll have a book review. I encourage you guys, go get a copy of this book. Read this story. It reads like something out of a fiction movie. It reads like something you would expect in a communist country, not here in America. It will bother you, but it is just amazing to read. But how do you said in chapter 21, hope's a tricky thing. You try and hold on to it, but after a while it becomes heavy, almost like a burden. You start to question whether it's worth carrying around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How do you hold your head up and keep moving forward? You guys went through multiple appeals. You went through multiple stories that the papers wrote trying to help you and other people trying to help you, to get slapped down over and over again by the district attorney's office, who did not want to deal with this again. They did not want to admit any wrongdoing, so haven't, as far as I'm aware of. They did not want to give this a chance to come to light again.
Mm-hmm.
Do you persevere in what most of us would call living hell for so many years and keep going?
I think for me, I always tell people, like, it wasn't by choice, it was by force. It was like I didn't have a choice but to persevere. Like, I didn't, because I knew I shouldn't be there. I knew that I believed that eventually someone was going to start listening to us. And I think just watching the environment that I was in, like, I had come to the conclusion, and I still feel this way, that I didn't belong there. Like, I didn't fit in with the crowd of people there. And some people from there take offense when I say that. What do you mean by that? I didn't. Like, I did not fit in with that crowd. Like, I wasn't a thief. I wasn't a crook. I wasn't a murderer. I wasn't a rapist. I wasn't any of those things, right? So I understand that I should have been in another environment. And then I had my kids who were very young when I left, right? that I was still in constant communication with. All I've ever really wanted to do was see one of them walk across the stage, graduate from somewhere, right? Or just obtain some goals that they set for themselves in life, right? And so I knew in order to do that, I had to get out of that place. And those are my kids and my family. I have an amazing brother as well that like kept me motivated to know that you have to get here with us because this is where you belong. So it helped me through that process. Was I adapting to my environment? Of course. Like, was I doing things to survive in the penitentiary? Yes. But I knew when I walked out of that place that I was leaving that person behind and I'll never see him again. I don't even like who that person was. So it's like for me now, when people talk about the old me, I always reiterate that I don't even like the old me. So I know how to keep him confined and how to deal with my problems through different means now.
So I want to get clear on a couple of those points. So family was a huge driver for you. You
Yeah.
had home to your children.
Yes.
That was a huge, because I want to identify some of these things for other men who are going through difficult times, and it will probably be a very different situation than you were going through at the time. God, I hope so. I cannot say how like angry I am that this kind of injustice happens in the U.S. Like you have those institutions you believe in,
Mm-hmm.
and I was raised very patriotic, and America I still think is the greatest country. We're not perfect, like we got our problems, but when you see an injustice like y'all's story, like I'm angry at such a deep level. It's like this doesn't happen in the world I live in. This should not happen. We're supposed to be above this. We're supposed to be better than this. So I apologize if I get a little crazy with that, but it's how do we identify some of these things? So family was a huge driver for you, and you knew you needed to get home to your family, which that's amazing. That's amazing that you had that support.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful and joyful that you did get home to your family. You said you held on to the fact that because you were innocent, you knew this was not where you belonged. So while you adapted, you never accepted that this was it.
Right. And I think for that, to that point, like a lot of things that people learn how to do in the penitentiary, like I never learned how to do. Like the food they make, how to wrap the burritos. I knew how to do none of that stuff. People used to be like, you've been here 20 years and you still don't know. Like I would send my food to somebody else and they would make it in. It just was certain things I just didn't want to learn. I didn't want to learn because they're very savvy in there. Like I didn't watch guys make a banana pudding out of a pack of cookies. I never learned how to do that. Like it was just too much for me. Like I wanted to get home and do stuff the traditional way. Like there's a roller coaster we get on in there. And I got off of that roller coaster a long time ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we had these highs and we had these lows, and there's really no in between. Like if we filed something in 98 and my lawyer filed it and it looked good to me, I would get this really high because I would feel like this is it. And then when they deny it, I get a really low. So I want to say like towards the middle of that, I just decided I'm not getting on that roller coaster no more. I'm just going to let this stuff play out and I'm going to deal with it as it comes, right? And I think that was the best thing I could have done because those lows become really lows. Like you don't even want to come out your cell. You want to just be by yourself. And it's virtually impossible because you're always around somebody else.
So you held on to the truth. You held on to the fact that you didn't belong. You clung to your family. Were you, I know at some points you were in the same facility as Daniel. Were you in the same facility as any other guys?
Very rare. Like we always in the county jail together.
Mm-hmm.
but we all started to transition to the Department of Corrections around the same time. Like, I want to say Lewis Gardner, we might have spent 4 or 5 months in the Department of Corrections together. Then he went to a medium joint because me and Daniel did all of our time in a max facility. So me and Daniel were around each other majority of the time that we spent in our DLC. We might have been away from each other at the most a year and a half, but the rest of it, we were in the same facility.
Did you guys get to interact much? I know, and Daniel, and some of the portions of the book said that he got to talk to you from time to time. That really helped carry him.
Yeah.
Y'all were at least in this together.
Right. We would meet up in like church service or Islamic service, or I would schedule visits. My family would come down. They might call him out or we could see each other, but we were rarely in the same cell house. But we were always like a kite or a letter away from each other where we could talk and communicate with one another. So we used to get pulled to the law library together so we could try to figure out the letters that we wanted to write to the Tribune and different lawyers asking for help and stuff like that. So me and him had way more interaction with each other than any of us on this case.
Another interesting aspect I thought was you got proactive about it instead of part of that keeping your head up. You got proactive about your future. You said, this isn't where I belong. I'm going home. And so you got proactive and started educating yourself and learning things you needed to learn so you could do something about the situation.
I think like my attorneys always say, like, they loved me as a client because one thing about me, I knew my facts. I could tell them off the top of my head. I didn't have to be looking at a piece of paper. But what I didn't know how to do was formulate a petition. I didn't know how to put it in the legal jargon and how to write different petitions that the courts would accept. So all of the information that would go into my petitions would basically come from me, and they will put it in the language that needs to be had. And I think for Daniel, he was doing the same. Like he talks about educating himself through reading the dictionary back and forth, right? Because he comes from he was a product of the system. Like he was in group homes and stuff like that when we caught this case. So he'd never really been around his family. So a lot of us in there became his family to a degree. And we all like gravitated around each other. And it's a lot of guys that we met in there that are actually home now. And some didn't come home under the wrongful conviction, but they were juvenile lifers who got resentenced because they deemed juvenile natural life unconstitutional. And we're all out here like prospering and doing the right things and trying to stay connected to changing. Like we're trying to stay connected to reform and just not throwing away kids and at 15 and 16 and saying he doesn't have the capacity to change. This is a kid. Like he don't even realize what he's done or what he's been a part of. So we're just fighting those fights now and trying to stay connected to a lot of guys that are still there fighting for their freedom and just being their support system now.
You said that y'all would meet at chapel every now and then. Was faith a big thing for you in your life before you went in? Or is that something, it was a place to go? Did it play a part in sustaining you or no?
I'll tell anybody, like, I don't have a denomination, but I believe in God. Like, I'm spiritual, but I think all denominations that help you be a better person are okay with me, right? But as a kid, like me and my brother we went to Sunday school every weekend. We had a cousin whose grandfather was a pastor. So we used to go to his church and it was mandatory that we got up and went. So we do understand the Bible and know the Bible. And I think my faith has always been there. But I will say this, like, that was a point in my life where I felt like me and God was having a misunderstanding because I didn't understand why my mother left so early because she wasn't but 38. I was 16. And my mother was probably one of the most beautiful people in my family because I also come from a family of addicts. Like we had drug addicts, we had alcoholics, we had people that had habits, right? My mother wasn't one of those. She got up and went to work every day, took care of her kids, made sure we were afforded the things that we needed to sustain in life. And so I didn't understand that. And then I went through what I was going through. And I used to ask God, like, what is going on? Like, we can't be on the same page because I'm getting put through so much right now, right? But now when I look back on it, I believe, why not me? Because I watched so many other people go through so many terrible things. Like, I don't question God anymore. I don't question what he does for me, what he has in store for me. Like, I just take it on the chin and I do the best with what's put in front of me. But I definitely had a time in my life where I used to tell people that, like, man, me and God having a real misunderstanding right now. I don't know what's going on, but this can't be life, right? And I think now I came out on the other side. I know I'm a better person than I was before I went in, right? And I also think like God may have saved my life because I was doing things that could have gotten me killed. I was in a neighborhood that I could have died in any day, every day. Uh, and I could have possibly been there for something that I may have had a part in or had something to do with if I'd have been out there that long and continued down the road that I was on, right? So I think God did me a favor. I don't look at this situation as a blessing, but I look back on it and be like, would I be here today had I not went through this situation?
I think anyone who says that they believe in God in some shape, but hasn't at some point been like, you and I are not doing real good right now, God. Like I would generally consider that fairly like just a weak belief, anyways. 'Cause I know I've
Right.
started my fights with God where I'm just like, you and I we're not talking right now. All right, we're,
Right.
we are not in a good place. I think that's very much involved in anybody's relationship with God. You can't be in a relationship with somebody and always be 100% on the same page. So
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious. I did an interview a couple years ago with a guy who spent 19 years in prison, and he was justified. He'll even tell you like, no, I should have been there. That's like totally legit. Um, and in that time, he ended up spending like 370 days in solitary.
Mm-hmm.
And he he found his relationship with God there, right?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a denomination, but he found his relationship with God there. So I'm always curious how things impact people, right? Some people go through a situation and all of a sudden there's the old saying, there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole.
Mm-hmm.
People go through their own variation of hell, and some people come out and go, faith is what it, right? I'm just trying to isolate what are some of the things that helped you survive, because coming out, you're now in a position where you're helping people, where you're
Yes.
trying to serve people. And I think anybody who's even caught a piece of your story, it would be so easy to go, they have every right to be angry, to be bitter, to be like, screw the system, screw the world, you guys all suck, right?
Mm-hmm.
If anybody is justified in that feeling, and to see that you came to this side of it and went, I'm going to impact people's lives in a positive
Right.
way, right? That's not common resilience. That's not a common outcome.
Mm-hmm. I think just as an adult, like I do understand, like I was a part of the problem at one time. I was a part of the problem in my community. Uh, and now I just want to be a part of the solution. I want to try to help young men not go down the road that I went down. And it's weird because like, yeah, so when I came home, I started working in violence prevention. I started out with Ceasefire, then I ended up at the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago, which I stayed there like 6, 7 years, probably almost 8. Became a supervisor over there. We got to interact with young men who I felt like I was looking myself in the mirror at times. And if I had somebody like myself talking to me back then, I would have made different decisions in life and how I moved in life. And so it gives me the opportunity to like tell my story. And I'm also trying to meet these guys where they're at. I got the opportunity to go back to school, and I had took some early childhood development classes because I wanted to figure out ways to educate my grandbabies and how to know how to deal with them at that age. And the term emotional intelligence came up. And as the teacher was talking, she was talking about how we should have heard this term in kindergarten or first grade. I was 44 at the time, 45. I had never heard that term before. And I was explaining to her, like, that's not taught in our communities, right? But it made so much sense to me, like, not just as a kid, but as an adult, like, knowing how to keep your emotions in check and how to intelligently deal with your emotions, because a lot of the things we do be impulse decisions and we make bad decisions when we're emotional, right? So it gave me an opportunity to understand like what was going on in my life and why I moved differently, because not even knowing that term, I had figured out how to deal with my emotions in there. Because I think in that place, if somebody dealt with their emotions the wrong way, someone may die. And it's like, okay, you can't just jump off the deep end right here, because people get hurt in this place and they get hurt badly. And so it taught me a lot about, I became more diplomatic, sort of say. Like why I'll sit down and talk to guys that I usually wouldn't talk to, because it wasn't really much to talk about. But we would all have to come to an understanding. And I think like for me, I find myself now, like I think before I speak, I think before I act. I think like, and people be like, why you ain't respond? Because I'm taking a moment, because I know that we're not computers. So, because once this come out of my mouth, I can't take it back. So let me think before I say what it is I'm about to say. And so I really enjoy like talking to the youth and telling them my story, because a lot of them won't believe my story, because I think people expect me to be angry or to be hostile about the situation. And I'm really not. Like, I'm not that forgiving. Like I haven't forgiven the people who purposely done this to us, but I'm not angry because that's something they had to deal with down the line, not me. So I'm just about bettering myself and putting myself in a better position now.
So here you are on this side of hell. And I mean, I don't know a better way to term it.
Oh, it definitely was that.
I
Like it's
have temporarily been, I have a friend who used to be the only death row chaplain in the state of Washington.
mhm.
And so I have been to our max facilities here to help with church services before. And I remember walking in, just the unsettling feeling of walking in and through the wall that is the gate at that facility. And I thought, and I get to leave, right? I cannot imagine what you guys went through over that time period.
Mhm.
And with that, so I get why people think you'll be angry. But on this side of that, through all this that you endured, through all the resilience you showed and getting home to your loved ones, on this side of this, you found this new purpose in impacting young people and other men and trying to help them steer in a more positive direction, trying to make sure they don't make the same mistakes, trying to make sure they're equipped. And you made this natural transition. Was it just that smooth, or was this something that just you're like, I have to do something about this?
I think I felt a obligation and a duty when I came home to do the right thing, stay connected to the Department of Corrections, to my friends that I had grown to know in there. Uh, and it's weird. I have a friend who's now the executive director of the Illinois Restored Justice Foundation. He did 26 years, caught his case when he was 16, was a juvenile lifer. And when he tells his story, he talks about how I impacted what he came home and did. Because like for years, we had a lot of guys going home. It was like, man, give me your information. I'm gonna send you some. I'm gonna write you. I'm gonna stay in touch with you. And it never happened. Like I came home and I picked up that baton and ran with it. Like I've been home 11 years. I don't think there's been 3 days straight that I haven't gotten a call from the Department of Corrections. I sent pictures. I don't write because that's like a lot. But they had this thing where you can go on the internet and send little messages now. I send money. I take calls from everybody. Like I just try to stay connected and give those guys that hope. And if I could possibly not pay for a lawyer, but find a lawyer like they did with us and take their case pro bono, I even do that. Like just trying to make sure they know that somebody's out here pulling for them. And I think like now we formed this group of us, where it's probably over 20 of us that's out here now that's doing the same thing. And it's ever growing, ever expanding because guys are coming home every day now. Guys are coming home every month. So we're seeing one of our other friends come out and they're getting right in with the group, and that support system is getting bigger. And I think it's also getting society to better understand it because now the story is being told by impacted people. It's not being told because the first person to take up the baton in Illinois for juvenile natural lifers was a middle-aged white woman whose son was in there for natural life, and she was always fighting and telling the story with another lady named Joby Cates. But Joby's goal was always to turn the realm over, the hands over to impacted people so we could tell our own stories. And now we're there, and it's making much more of a social impact than when it's being told by someone who's never seen the inside of a police car, who really can't tell you what goes on behind those walls, right? And like you just spoke about walking in, I fought for my right when I came home to be able to go visit people in there. Because a lot of times they don't want to let us back in there because they'll claim it's a breach of security because we've been there before and this and that. And it was eerie, like walking in through the front door because I always came in through the back or the sally port. So I had never walked in and been able to walk out. So like my first few visits, like I used to have butterflies going in there. I actually sat on the wrong side of the visiting room table before. Like I sat where the inmates sit. And they had to come over there like, hey, you ain't got to sit over there no more. You can sit over here, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm messed up. Like, let me get on this side. But it's just, I was programmed a certain way. So once I got back inside of there, the same movements and things I was programmed to do in there, they kicked back in for a split second. And even the guys that was in there that knew me was laughing like, hey, bro, you don't have to sit over there no more. You can sit over here. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy. But it's definitely a weird feeling like when you walking away from that place, knowing you leaving people behind. And my son used to go through that as a kid. Like he used to cry when it was time to leave at the end of the visit and tell his mama he wanted to stay with me. And it's like, you can't stay with me. And I don't want you to stay with me, right? So it's like, when you care about people and you go in there and you getting to know those guys like y'all was going in with the prison ministry, some of those guys going to grow on you, whether you went in with that goal or not, because some people have genuinely changed in there and they've become good people. They just may not get another chance to actually show the world that.
For men listening right now who are going through their rough time, right? I have a personal training background, which has changed the way I think about things, right? I don't think there is heavyweight. There is heavyweight relative to that person, right? What's heavyweight to me is not heavy, is beyond concept to some people, and for other people is nothing, right? So there are men going through hard times in their life, difficult situations where they're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. They're not seeing how they're going to wade through this. And they certainly are not sure how they're going to move forward in a positive direction. So what are your first 3 suggestions for men who are trying to come through a situation to move forward in a positive direction?
I think first and foremost, they can't give up, because if we give up, it makes it easier for everybody else to give up. If we stop fighting, who's going to fight for us? And I think you have to have some faith in something. You have to find something to grasp onto that motivates you every day to get up and fight for the outcome that you're looking for. Because some guys are just looking for time cuts or lower sentences and stuff like that. So it's like, if there's something that you're looking for, you have to have something that motivates you to achieve that. And I think you just have to, in that place, it may be easier said than done, but you have to surround yourself with like-minded people, with people that have goals and aspirations for themselves. Because some people in there just don't. And you have some innocent people in there that probably have just given up and they just laying around. If they making commissary, they're fine. They're content with that. I never became content with any of that stuff. It was just, I just knew that there was more to life that I wanted to do. And a lot of it came from my mother. She instilled something different in me and my brother. And I was having a conversation with somebody 2 days ago, and they were talking about being a product of your environment. I don't believe in that, because me and my brother came out of the same environment and we took 2 different paths in life. My brother's never seen the inside of a police car. He's a military veteran. He has 2 boys. He has some grandkids. Now he's been with his wife almost 30 years. So it's I feel like I made poor decisions after my mother left, and my brother kept making good decisions. So when people say that, do I understand that it happens? Yes. But you also have doctors, lawyers, police, and everything else that come out of those same environments. So I don't think it's just a science to that. And I think as us being in that place, we have to really fight for what it is we want. Because if we stop fighting, it gives everybody else the opportunity to stop fighting. Because if we're not fighting, that means we're not sending stuff to people to try to help us. We're not asking for help anymore. So they have to stay steadfast in their belief that the outcome that they're looking for is going to happen.
Deon, what's next for you? You guys have written the book and you've got this organization going. You're trying to help more men. You're trying to help guys on the inside. You're trying to help anybody you can. What's the next project? What's the next goal?
For me, right now, I've really been focused on getting this message out to the world. I am a believer in law enforcement, because I don't really want to feel like, I'm not a person that's disband the police. I don't believe in that, because it'll be the wild, wild west and people will prey on people, right?
Yep.
And I also have family members that have been Chicago police, have retired from there. I have aunts, cousins, and everything. I watched people in our community be law enforcement, but the community knew them. So they were treated differently and we responded differently to them. So I think what's next for me is just to keep moving in a positive direction. I go see my mother almost every time I go back to Illinois, right? And one of the things I ask constantly is, are you proud of me now? Because I know I've disappointed her in life by going through some of the things that I went through, right? So now I focus on making sure this lady is proud of me and understands that I got everything that she said. And I say it to my kids. Now I find myself repeating things that she used to say to me as a kid to them. And I think for me now, I just want to push this book. I'm like a part business owner of a steakhouse that just was built in Barrington, Illinois. I'm doing rehabs now. I've gotten into the property and the real estate stuff. So I'm just I want to write my own obituary. I want to be able to put some things in there that wasn't there at first. I really don't like going to funerals where they be like, well, he got baptized when he was 6. He graduated from the 8th grade, and then they start naming our family members. Like some people pass away and really haven't done anything in life. And I don't want people to have to put fluffers in my obituary. I want it to be some stuff that really means something. And I want it to be some stuff that change the way people see things. Like, I think like one of our main goals now is to like bring forth some awareness that this stuff happens, and it's still happening in Chicago, because Chicago is like the wrongful conviction capital of the world. There was times when in the late 70s, early 80s, maybe even going to the 60s, where guys were being waterboarded. Guys were, this one detective, they found a battery with jumper cables in his room where he was putting it on grown men's testicles and saying they confessed to a murder. They'll confess to anything you ask them to confess to get out that room, right?
Yeah.
And they have a torture system set up right now where they're revisiting a lot of those cases. But these are men that went in there at 18, 19. They 60 and 70 years old now. But they're still sitting in IDOC because of these things that happen to them. So I think we're just pushing this awareness and getting people to understand that we do have the capacity to change. Like, I think people feel like, oh, he was a gang member, he'll never change. He was a kid, though, that really didn't understand what he was doing. And then I had this thing, too, like, in life, I feel like there's this thing in my mind where you're either surviving or you're living, right? And I think I'm living now. Like, I walk out my door comfortably because I know I'm going to make it back to my door, because I'm not doing anything that puts my life in jeopardy. And I understand things do happen. I'm traveling. I'm seeing the world. I done been to Dubai. I done been to Dominican Republic. I done been places that I watched commercials when I was in the Department of Corrections and said, man, I want to visit that place one day. I've been there now. So I think like that's my whole goal now, is to continue to push this message on the world and get them to understand that we do have the capacity to change. We do have the capacity to become productive citizens and to do things that matter in our communities and our society.
Deon, where is the best place for people to connect with you after they hear this show?
We have the Hazel Boys website. And then my email address is deon.patrick42@yahoo.com, because I don't have a lot of social media under my name. So it's like, it'll be kind of hard. But I think the hazelboys.com would be the best place to get in touch with me or either any of my co-authors and speak to them about anything that they've been through as well.
All right. And guys, of course, I'll have all of Deon's links down in the description in the show notes, whatever platform you're on with us today. Deon, if our audience heard nothing else today, right, in this moment, what is the most important takeaway you want people to hear today from you?
I think most importantly, like, is always seek the truth. Don't let somebody tell you that this is what happened and this is how it happened and just run with that. Do your own homework and your own due diligence to really dive off into and figure out if this even makes sense. Because when something don't make sense to me, I don't agree with it. And that's just who I am as a person. And so I think, like, always do your own homework.
Guys, with that, thanks for joining us today on the Driven to Thrive broadcast. For Deon and myself, guys, keep living, keep thriving, and be better tomorrow because of what you do today. We'll see you on the next one.
The Driven to Thrive broadcast. Purpose, growth, and lasting impact for men. Helping men go from living to thriving, purpose-filled, intentional lives.